Today we're reviewing A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and I can't believe how amazing this book is. I did not think that this was going to be as good as it was, and I cannot wait to talk to you about it. I had really low expectations for this book, and I shouldn't have. So let's review it. If you want to see my reviews for the entire series of A Song of Ice and Fire and the individual books, then I will leave those linked in the description box for your convenience. Somebody commented on a video of mine saying that I should read A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, claiming that it was some of George.R.R. best work. I thought, how can that be possible? So prior to reading this, I wasn't expecting too much, but I was interested to see why it was so highly raved. I could not put this down. I rated this book 5 out of 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and we just got to talk about it. I agree with the person who told me that this was some of George.R.R. best work. This is brilliantly written. However, it feels like it's written by a different author. It doesn't have the same writing style as A Song of Ice and Fire, and I think that's why it's so intriguing. To give some context, this is a set of 3 novellas. They are classed as a prequel. They are set after the events of Fire and Blood, but before the events of A Song of Ice and Fire. And it is the same world that George.R.R. has created. However, these novellas I felt were much more light-hearted. They are a much easier read. A Song of Ice and Fire is quite a challenging, difficult read. I would say that it's a lot more brutal. I flew through this. So firstly, I want to discuss the partnership between Dunk and Egg and how brilliantly formed that is. These are 2 main characters that are absolutely captivating. The novellas are told through Dunk's point of view. It's a third-person writing style, but you get to see the inside of Dunk's thoughts, his perspective, and you get to see the world through his eyes. He's very honourable, he's very loyal, he's a good guy. You don't get many of them often. All he wants to do is be an honourable knight. He also has some self-confidence issues. He refers to himself as Dunk the Lunk, thick as a castle's walls. He also refers a lot to the old knight that he used to squire for, who has passed away before the events of this book, Sir Arlen of Pennytree. We get an insight into Dunk's connection with this man and some of the things that he's learnt from him that he is now passing on to Egg, his own squire. And then the partnership and the duo between Dunk and Egg, that is brilliantly formed, that is so well executed. It's like you've got the main guy and his sidekick. And I want to read more adventures that the 2 of them go on. Their banter is so funny. Egg is really feisty, he doesn't know how to hold his tongue. Dunk likes to act like the master and telling him off. And obviously there is that theme that Egg is actually Aegon Targaryen. So he is actually a very powerful person, even though he's only a boy of about 8, I think. And that adds so much depth to this storyline that he has to keep his identity hidden. I want to read more about their adventures. 3 novellas wasn't enough, I want more. Although I've mentioned that this book is very witty, it's light-hearted, it's a fun read, it does actually touch upon some deeper themes and some harder issues as well. For example, you still have the political theme that is also very evident in A Song of Ice and Fire, especially when looking at the Targaryen line, the conflict between them, and it all comes down to who is the rightful heir of the throne, which is something that is so consistent with A Song of Ice and Fire as well. So you have that one theme running through this book and the main series. So it kind of shows you that this political issue has been happening for centuries. It's something that has always happened. It's in Fire and Blood as well. And this book really puts that into perspective, that nothing has really changed. So what I'll do is I'll talk you through my review of each of the novellas, and then I'll talk about some of the consistent themes and comparing this book to A Song of Ice and Fire book series. So the first novella is The Hedge Knight, and this is the introduction to the duo between Dunk and Egg. This is where they meet as well. Again, we see that Dunk doesn't view himself very highly. He keeps referring to himself as unintelligent. He also keeps making reference to the fact that he was born in Flea Bottom and is probably a bastard. Egg is a feisty boy who says and does what he wants, and that is how he ends up in this partnership with Dunk, because Dunk actually tells him that he doesn't need a squire, he doesn't want him to join him, but Egg does anyway. The main plot of this novella is that they enter a tourney so that Dunk can prove himself. We're introduced to the first evil, cruel character, who is Aerion Targaryen, who in his tourney is a little bit too harsh and ends up killing the horse of his opponent, which you're not supposed to do. Aerion also beats up a puppeteer woman in the square, and that's where Dunk gets himself involved because he ends up trying to save her and beating the crap out of Aerion. You know, which debatedly he shouldn't do because it's a Targaryen. This guy is very powerful. But Dunk is a very honourable man. He couldn't stand to see a woman being harmed who does not deserve it, essentially. So because of this, they have to do a 7x7 trial. So Dunk needs to find 6 other men to be his allies and to fight in a trial against 7 of Aerion's men. He is able to find 6 other men eventually. It's a little bit difficult to find them, and one of those is Baelor Targaryen. I really liked Baelor. I like how he vouches for Dunk, and even though Dunk wins the trial overall, unfortunately Baelor is killed in this event. But we do almost get a little bit of justice because Aerion is taken far, far away and is punished for his actions. I think that's one of the things about each of these novellas, is that there is some form of justice at the end of them. They do wrap things up and tie things up quite nicely at the end of each novella, which you don't get in A Song of Ice and Fire. There aren't really any happy endings at all in A Song of Ice and Fire, but in these novellas I feel like the ends of them were all kind of happy endings. The next novella is The Sworn Sword. This novella is based on a petty feud between 2 sides, really. Dunk and Egg are in service to a man, Sir Eustace. They find out that the river has dried up, they're going through a drought, there's no water, so Dunk and Egg are in search of finding this. They find out that another side is stealing the water and using it for their castle moat, so this is the Red Widow's side, Lady Roanne. This is the novella where the least amount of stuff happens, and there's not really any important issues. We find out that Sir Eustace is actually a traitor. He's got one side of the story, Lady Roanne has the other side. There's a quote that I really enjoy that I think resonates with this novella, and that's, "There's 3 sides to every story. There's your side, there's my side, and then there's the truth." There isn't that much history. There's a little bit trickled in as to why Sir Eustace is a traitor. There's a little bit of history there. However, it is still a very quick, very enjoyable read. Something is shaking my entire house. What is that? I'm genuinely going to have to Google if we've just had an earthquake. How bizarre. I've got no idea what that was. And we do find out that Dunk gets a smooch at the end of that novella, which is quite nice for him. He's a little bit like Sansa Stark in the sense that I feel like he believes in fairy tales a little bit. He's got this very hopeful view of the future. He believes a lot in honour and good things happening to good people. And then the third novella is The Mystery Knight. We have another tourney, but this one is due to Lord Butterwell's marriage. And Dunk enters the tourney because he keeps telling himself he only needs to win 2 trials in order to get some profit. Obviously, he fails in the first trial. That was always going to happen. But we then find out that there's actually some traitors involved in this. Dunk's opponent was actually paid by somebody to kill Dunk. Obviously the guy didn't kill him, but we now know that Dunk has made an enemy somewhere along the way. How could that happen to somebody as nice and noble as Dunk? We also find out in this novella that there is somebody named the Fiddler who actually turns out to be one of the Targaryens. So there is a ongoing, consistent feud between Daeron and Daemon Targaryen. There is also the story about the dragon egg that goes missing whilst the trials are taking place, and this poor young lad is blamed for it and tortured for it just because he's a bastard. So his name is Glendon Ball, and I really like this guy because he keeps telling people, I know I'm born out of wedlock, I know I don't come from the best upbringing, but I am actually a good knight, and I'll show you, I'll prove it to you all. Nobody believes him, everybody mocks him, but then even after he's been tortured, he gets upon his horse and he wins the trial against Daemon. The guy's just been tortured for hours and he's just won a trial against a Targaryen. This guy actually is a good knight. Everybody should have believed him from the get-go. And I just like that it doesn't matter what your upbringing is. If you're a good knight, you're a good knight. So I feel like we got a little bit of justice for that, even if he was tortured along the way. One thing that I absolutely love about this particular edition of the book is that there are illustrations throughout by Gary Gianni. Very sorry if I've not pronounced that correctly. But this just helps to contextualize everything. I've never read a book as an adult that has very consistent pictures throughout it, and I didn't know if it was going to be annoying or not. But actually it wasn't, and I found it really, really helpful. They're so detailed, they're so talented. I like as well that each illustration, you can tell it's just been done by like pen or pencil strokes. That's the kind of print that I would want to have up on my wall. Like I'd want to frame it, I might just frame the book. Some of the themes that were very similar to A Song of Ice and Fire. One of the things I loved about A Song of Ice and Fire was the reference to the past history. That's another theme that was in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms that I really enjoyed. There's reference to the Blackfire Rebellion, the issues with legitimising bastards, which we do then see in A Song of Ice and Fire. I can't remember which book, but Catelyn is discussing the problems with legitimising John the bastard and what that would trigger and what that would cause. And then there's reference to the events that are also referenced in this book as well. We also have themes of who is the rightful king, who deserves the throne. There's also themes of honour, but it's portrayed in a different way than in A Game of Thrones. So for example, the most honourable character that we have in A Game of Thrones is Ned Stark. He's a great guy as well, but he meets his demise. He's not rewarded for that honour. However, in this book, the honourable character is Dunk. And as I mentioned, every single novella seems to tie everything up. At the end of it, he is always back where he needs to be, with Egg, on the road. And we have characters that we can really root for. And that was different to A Song of Ice and Fire, because if you root for a character, they're likely to get killed. Now it says that these are official prequels to A Song of Ice and Fire. The word prequel is odd. I mean, it's set before the events of A Game of Thrones and where A Song of Ice and Fire begins. However, I don't necessarily feel that you need to read this. I feel like you could also read this as a standalone. Like I do feel like you could read this and not have read A Song of Ice and Fire. You don't need to read this before A Song of Ice and Fire. But the stories are great, they're really light-hearted, really quick, easy reads, but I wouldn't really say it's a prequel because it doesn't touch upon much of what's included in A Song of Ice and Fire. The characters aren't the same, obviously, and like I said, I rated it 5 stars because I couldn't find fault with any of it. I don't give 5 stars out often because I find that I get bored a lot, or sometimes the pacing of a book can feel very slow, or a character might be too annoying for my liking. I normally always find a reason to not give something 5 stars. With this, I couldn't find that reason. It's wholesome. So that is my review of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. If you read it, what did you think to it? I would love to hear your opinions, so make sure you leave me a comment. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know that you did. And if you want to see more from me, then please subscribe because it's free and it lets you know every time I upload a video. I will see you next time, or rather you'll see me, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.